I am Juhan Sonin, and by day, my day gig is masquerading as someone who designs and leads a company called Involution Studios. I think maybe 250 million people use the software that we've designed. It's not our label on it, someone else's. And then I also lecture at MIT on product design. And let's set the stage a little bit here. We've treated our condition as humans the same for millennia. Like, we roam around here and we eat mostly green stuff. We drink water. Some of us have sex and procreate if you're lucky. And as long as we're feeling okay, we think we're okay. And generally that's true. And then health happens, and usually when we least want or expect it. So in the past, you have a tribal leader who's done this several hundred times when you need to set broken bones. Or 100 years ago, they had a fabulous service where someone came to your house and actually provided you medical assistance in your own bed. God forbid we actually have that kind of level of service now. It's coming back in concierge medicine, but I think this is really lovely. Now today, there are other lovely parts, mostly on the technological side, that allow us to see here. This is my arm when I tried to catch my son flying off the couch and I snapped my bicep muscle. By the way, all the data you're going to see here is mine and relatively true and open source. It's all available on GitHub. You can download my entire genome under CC0 license and synthesize it and plant it at a crime scene if you so deliver or want to deliver that way. But look, we've been treating our health as periodic, as episodic issues, these sort of rare spikes in your health that require these extreme interventions. This is management by exception, one of our favorite words as designers in big corporate cultures. Now, look, it's remarkable what's transpired over the past maybe 100 years, even the past 40, even the past 5, where 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, we were treating burns with aloe only, right? And washing them daily. To even 50 years ago, the same. Now we've got paint on skin, in essence. They take your cells, they separate it from your blood, in essence, your skin cells, and then culture it within 4 hours and spray it back on. So you're leaving the hospital after first, second, third degree burns with your own skin that's pliable and beautiful, looks like nothing ever happened, 48 hours later. How's that for a FUBAR, right? Pretty freaking amazing. Now, just over the past weekend, I'll give you a local, very personal example for me. My son, my 7-year-old son Udo, did a spit test for his 23andMe kit, right? A little bizarre, but genomics for the masses, under $100 for SNPs, okay? And then, I'm working on very little sleep at the moment because he had an accident, he's okay, but here he is at Children's getting a CAT scan for his brain. Some amazing technology that has happened, yet we're still stuck in this land of episodic treatment, right? Both in terms of thinking, in terms of engineering and designing for health. And let's face it, humans really don't want to think about health. It's the same as 1,000 years ago. It's just not something we want on the frontal cortex. So let's do a quickie thought experiment. Let's just suppose your data is just auto-magically collected, right? All the data. Financial, it's already pretty much done now because everyone cares about the mighty dollar more than anything else. Travel, that's pretty much collected. But your eating habits, your exercise, examining your biome in your home, it's just captured, it just happens. So here's one take of this. Some of you may have seen this. It's an open source technique called HGraph. It's your health in one picture. That middle score is are you passing or failing, right? We've all gone to US or European schools or wherever where they say, A to F. That should be pretty recognizable. And then there's the green zone, right? Not the Iraq green zone, but the good zone, where if you're in that, if your data resides in that, you're doing okay. If it's inside or outside of it, not so good. But this is like a holistic view of your health, your individual data here. And now, just like Eames 10 by 10, I don't know if you've seen that movie, it's a classic where he goes from the galactic to the atomic, right? The same technique can be applied here where I zoom into that HGraph into one particular part, into my labs. Boom, this is actually a little old. I'm I'm doing a little better than this after some diet changes. It's my Cleveland Heart Labs. I highly recommend the service. If you're interested in cardiology at all and blood work and just getting a workup, holy smokes, this is fantastic. This data is not. But again, you're able to see it. All my health is there at my fingertips. Again, I'm just going through this sort of thought exercise. Again, I can see my partner and my spawn. Now, all of my health metrics are known. My family's health numbers are there. You can see the trends. You can see all this. You can help them through their journeys. It's at our fingertips. And yet, this is pretty much in stark contrast with what happens now in the design of your life. We have minimal transparency into our metrics. Our work, our biology is increasingly multidimensional, and we want, as humans, as a species, a flat decision space. We want the eins, zwei, eins, zwei, eins, zwei, eins, zwei. But guess what? It's just way more complicated than that, and we are not good at that as humans. And most of the data we get isn't decision grade. And so there are lots of ways we can screw up here, other than the fact that we fly by the seat of our pants most of the time. So, look, what's happening, I think now, in the next 5 years, is a lot what DARPA was talking about 30 years ago with sensor dust, right? I don't know if you're familiar with the term. It's going to bomb all over us. And let's talk about what's happening in the surveillance space. Now, this is going to be a little creepy, and that's by design. But there's part of my infatuation with the Voight comp machine. Blade Runner, seen it? Okay. If you haven't, it's a classic from, 1986-ish, right? Shows a really fabulous utopian future. Lots of sarcasm there. But this is the scene where a mechanical eye looks into a robot's eye or human's eye and determines what they are, right? Are they synthetic or are they human? Now, I think this is a freak-out moment for a lot of us in determining what the future of our health is, because we think about surveillance and security and the human condition. But like this scene, that's why I bring it up. But not unlike our current Dr. God model, this is the judge, the jury that carries out the assessment with a really tech-heavy device. Not so different from what we have now. It's not very human, again, by design for this flick. And ultimately, it's not about fetishizing hardware. I want to make that abundantly clear, even though I do fetishize in some ways. But hardware itself is on the decline. It's really a customer acquisition tool. That's all of our devices that us upper crusty white people are wearing are really a way to get into our data in our pocketbook, not about our health, honestly. But look, this device tracks a few spot-on health signals. It measures bodily functions like respiration, I think BP and heart rate and eye movement, and the emotional response to provocative questions. And guess what? This technology is here, right? We're at this confluence of technology and data analytics maturity, hardware durability, where this can be everyday material, and miniaturization, where this is here, this forcing function is here through what we've done over the past 30 years. And I think we're going to have a good model, a prediction model for humans in the next 365 days. So, look, in the design studio, we've got so many of these things, right? From the Fitbit to pedometers to the digital scales, a live core on your phone for AFib determination, all this kind of stuff, fine stuff. But one problem with the current batch of wearables is just that. They're wearable, and they require a ton of mental overhead, relatively speaking, to engage with. So like take the Withings Pulse. I mean, this is pretty neat. It tracks steps, your general activity, and sleep and heart rate on demand. It's got this really pretty cool touchscreen for such a solid form factor in decent contrast, especially with the mediocre basis, right? So it's actually pretty interesting. But my biggest beef with all these micro wearables is that you're not wearing them 24/7, right? You stick them in your pocket, but that requires a pocket, and sometimes I'm not wearing pants. Maybe TMI, but I don't wear it at night. God, there was a Sleepio, or there's not Sleep.io, but there's another one that you had to wear on your head, Zio, right? That went under. Interesting concepts, right? Interesting data, but again, a lot of your physical mechanics and overhead to get engaged. And it's not set it and forget it. This isn't either. I've been wearing this for 8 years. Right? I wish that it would remind me every July, the third week, that I'm going to my cabin and swimming, because 4 out of those 8 years I go in the water with it. right? The exact same things happens. It's not smart enough to tell me. It should be after a sample size that big. So even there's the shine like this, but they still suffer from this like idea of the non-forgettables, right? So form factor isn't the question, because no form factor I think is really hits it on the head. Maybe it's invisible or the implant. Now, let's get into this. Is the flip side of this is from a wellness point of view, do off times really matter? And this is like again real data of like I forgot to wear it. I think my uptime is in the 2 nines or something like that. But I want a little plug that straps onto me as I'm feeling sickness, as something, there's a tinge in me and I'm feeling something slightly different that helps reduce sickness by, I don't know, 50, 70%. Now that, when it's coming on, that to me is helpful versus having to wear the, these little armbands or things on your feet or things on your head. It seems to be the wrong way to attack health. So that's why I want to look at health way, way after I do now. It's so prevalent because I design for it a lot now, but it's really about life that I should be worrying about. And I think we're going to be designing, and I know we are because many of us in this room are probably designing them now, design products that capture data really beautifully, and that really does mean invisibly. So I walk around my house, I stand at my desk. You should be standing more often. Sitting is dying, right? It's the new Mayo thing. But all this data is going to, your physiological data is going to be snagged by lots of sensors, again, like sensor dust. And this is, I think, where machine learning and some big data can crash together. Now here's my house now of how many sensors are in it. You can see over the next probably decade, it's just going to proliferate. They're going to be like fruit flies, right? Hopefully less disgusting. So I think for me also, the real center of your home, if you own one or rent one or whatever, or you have a hut, somewhere, I think that humans and machines are going to interface and sync up in a really fabulous new way. Fabulous is, debatable, but it's all about the bathroom. And I think that's going to be where most of these invisible sensors are going to live in terms of diagnosing, looking at you, getting a baseline. So I want to know, using technologies that are mostly available now, and they're becoming more OEM as we speak, that when I use the shower drain, my hair's coming off of it. You can do some great analysis on follicles right now, okay? I want to get basic GI in your analysis goodies, right? Total Health Toilet version 2 was already out 2 years ago. It did that. Now version 3 is even more fun. Your biome is slipping off all the time, your body, right? This is probably the best UID for any woman or man on the planet or in between. All the stuff on here, that's probably the best UID, but also tells you a lot about what's happening in your life, for better or for worse. So again, you can see all this stuff, heart rate, blood flow, automatically. So I don't think it's your bathroom in your room, I think it's your health room. Like Gattaca, people always, if you've seen that movie, there's a good scene in there about your one of these kinds of rooms helping you do this. That's here and that's coming. I think that's where it's going to happen. So this is like my bathroom. We are in the early stages of designing and putting this together. And here's my ugly mug. I'm going to be able to, there are going to be sensors behind this just like they have now with cheap webcams. You get it for 50 bucks, boom. It's able to take your BP and respiration automatically, right? Your PS3 does it now, PS4 camera does it now, Xbox does it so that when you're playing games, it can actually reflect your heart rate in your character in real time. Did you know, so the set-top box is the other argument for this, is that becoming more and more condition of your dipstick, just like a car. That's a little wrong. It should tell me what I should eat more. Life expectancy, that's always a good technique of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But one aspect I think that is really good, and this is an open source app we did some years ago, but predicting and showing how fat you're going to get. Right? When you show humans a picture of what they can become, that is enormously powerful. Right? This algorithm was actually true. This worked. And then I had to go whoop the other way around. It took me years to lose what I gained while making this thing. That's always a good sign. But I think that's a really powerful tool. And then health axioms, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the more and more we're coming to construction techniques that require more of a cookie-cutter approach to housing, even more so than now, you're going to see basically bathrooms off the shelf, like a little, is it not Little Rock, Egg Rock construction in Concord. I believe they've done these sort of drop-in bathrooms for a decade. They're getting to a point where there's going to be technology infused in the bathroom as a one-stop shop. Boom, done. So, I really don't give a rat's ass about patient portals and electronic health records for that much. It's really about the teachable moments in the data. So just happening beautifully and giving me these micro behavior shifts. And I'm pretty positive that the majority of all of our physiological signs and psychological will be snagged non-invasively through sensors that passively sniff you. So no web draws, no whiffs or sniffs. It's just all the data is going to happen to be collected automatically. And when we do this, it has to be designed beautifully and feel lovely. I don't want to think a lick about security, about the actual idea of health. I want to think about life, right? I don't want to be patient. We're all freaking patients in this room, right? But it's sort of a crappy way to go about thinking about health and healthcare, right? I want there to be a digital guard, and you can smell this coming, that pound on my data and look at my prior patterns of how to keep healthier, how to identify trends, tell me about them, and reduce my sickness rates exponentially, right? Now, I think right now you'll have these sort of family health guards. Like I subscribe to Citibank service. Is sort of ridiculous in some ways, but it tells me exactly where on the planet someone is spoofing my data, right? Now, it's all financially based, because again, it's Citibank, and that's all they care about. But that's coming too for all the rest of your data, right? So it's going to be aggregated. It's going to be able to sift through. Now, there are some people worry about privacy and other things. I think they're bigger fish to fry than that. And we're already sort of down the privacy slope of the road to perdition. So that's a whole separate conversation. But it'll tell me automatically any suspicious action and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's something, maybe, I don't know, it's called Love Life, or it's a Netflix type model. You subscribe to it $1 a month or $10 a month, I don't know what it is. But it'll tell me how to potentially change my behavior for good. And yeah, there's a small charge that's worth it, but it's a hassle-free, sort of beautiful service that just happens on my phone, in my bathroom, in my life. Now, the funky side is that the sensor cloud will view your online and physical activity, so that if 90% of your bandwidth is porn, right, maybe that's why I suffer from ED when I interact with my boyfriend. Now data is starting to trickle in on this. Granted, it's hard for researchers to get control groups, but it's the start of something that's actually the scarier side, too, of having this data, but probably something that needs to be battened down a little bit. Now, it does sound a little cheesy with this line, but I think that's really what I want to do, is focus my energy on what I really want to do. Now, I always have this picture of Woody Allen's Orgasmatron from Sleeper. I don't know if you've seen this movie. It's a classic. You walk in, you have a blast. You walk out 5 seconds later, right? That's how I think also you're going to see more items like this just on scanning and getting good baselines of you as a human in Walmarts, in Stop and Slops, in Duane Reade's, or wherever you pick up your GMO food. But this is where I think design can have a huge impact. So that's where I'm trying to play in that space. So I think we're getting towards stage 0 detection. Currently, here's our aging cycle. Right? So we as a species sort of progress through life. As men, unfortunately, our life, 18, it's downhill. For women, you're lucky enough, maybe it's late 20s. But it's all a road to hell, and it gets ugly over the long now. Right? Life gets better emotionally, a lot later in life probably. But physically, I'm talking physically, it's not so great. But now I think using a lot of interesting techniques, using biome analysis, emotional analysis, the breath evals, right? I think if health is beautifully integrated to our daily life, like we're getting continuous assessments on how to adjust. And that I think is here. And I think part of that will help us get here. Part of that, to get to more of an inverse bathtub curve, right? As an engineer, as an ex-engineer, I recognize this graph. When you go to Sears and you buy yourself a washing machine, right? You bring it home, put it in, works beautifully, right? Or it works beautifully, just goes and does its thing, or it crashes almost immediately. First month, first day, smokes over, right? But it works, generally, it works great for a long time, and then boom, catastrophic failure. That's sort of how I want my life to work, right? I don't want this like suffering from Alzheimer's, suffering from, numbers and numbers of other conditions that are really degrading for humans over time. This is how I think we're going to, maybe it's too late for us, maybe our kids will get closer to this. So here's some upcoming services that I think are really pretty good. I mean, the eye is one of the few places in the human body where you can have unadulterated access to blood vessels without slicing open anything. So, and you can actually see diabetes manifest about 2 years before showing up in any other physical exam. You can see Parkinson's. You can see Alzheimer's in advance. Now, there are other questions, well, what do you do about it? In some cases, there are some very good dietary things. Diet is probably one of the best things you should do for anything is clean that up. Less pizza, right? And with the eye, there are two new services that are sort of dovetailed. One is Netra, you may have heard of that. It's out of the Media Lab that does sub $50 ocular imaging for your mobile phone. Pretty damn cool, all right? And then what ties into that is Eyes First. It's an open source project that's collecting 70,000 different ocular images, high definition from around the planet, and slicing it up, pun intended, into about 8 to 10 major conditions that can be seen through that. And then they're making algorithms based on that statistically relevant sample size in order to do the prediction analysis on regular, everyday, non-treated ocular imaging. So you can go to your phone booth that was the, getting your, with your buddies and getting a picture done, and all of a sudden it says, "Psst, Juhan, you may want to come back here. We have a little tidbit for you," right? Because it's looking, instead of just being like a little picture booth, actually does a little more than that. These Zeiss cameras are beautiful. The glass is amazingly great, but you're seeing over time that they're really dropping in price. I mean, so you can now get, now they're about $10,000 versus $100,000 just 3 years ago. And now we can get, from a simple webcam, $50 webcam, you can get accurate pulse, respiration, blood oxygen measurements. It uses slight variations in your the skin tone caused by blood through the blood vessels, and you can see it on kids. They're doing it now at Children's and I believe at Beth Israel, where they're seeing basically the invisible and doing it non-invasively. So there are like hundreds of more examples with non-invasive sensors and procedures like nanoparticle sniffers, breath tests. Now, humans emit light. That to me was sort of new a couple months ago. And so you can actually use, Xerox has this new camera out that can look at you from here to the back of the room and determine AFib without touching you, right? Afibrillation or any heart irregularity, right? From that far away. No leads, no 7-lead or 12-lead or 3-lead EKGs. You can use a really powerful camera. That is pretty damn cool. Scanadu, you may have heard of this. This is like an Indiegogo project that's been dragging on forever, coming out of Ames lab, that does about a half dozen to a dozen different metrics non-invasively. It's like a hockey puck. Take a look at that. There's the breath sensor out of Adamant. It's out of Penn State. Because you can see about 25 different variables in your breath and different signatures for those, like metabolism rates, what you're eating. And then the other part of this is their 1 nanometer res spectrometers coming out for under $15, right? So what can you do with that? Well, great. You have a peanut allergy. You can check at a teeny level if there's anything remotely peanut-like in your food that you're about to eat. That can be really a lifesaver for lots of different people. Again, under 25 bucks. And I think this is just going to proliferate. I mean, you have other companies that rhyme with small greens that are testing out, edible, personalized medicine that you can go online and based on your biome, based on your workups, based on what your doctor has in their Epic EHR, which is only Epic all the time. And you'll go and order it just like a vending machine, and boom, you'll go pick it up. Hyper-personalized medicine. It's coming. Look, you'll be notified that your biome's shifting. It'll automatically come to you and say, what are you doing? One, here's some things you can do to change, but in order to you not to be wiped out for 3 weeks with this bug, here, it's come get this. Take it orally. It sort of melts away. No stuffy head, less aching muscles, no fever, no sign of health. That, to me, that honest signal, someone mentioned Sandy, is really, I think, a really important component. Yeah, it is scary. I'm already seeing some people going, no frickin' way. It is scary, but it's coming. I think HAL is here regardless whether we like it or not. So the last part of my little rant here is I think there are about half dozen areas to target that really need design and engineering assistance. The number one is determining the top 100 health signals that are just embedded in the fabric of my everyday life with the health bots, or that allow me to get painlessly, invisibly, silently, constantly, in the most friendly manner, all of my sort of data and health data, and then determine how to design the most lovely experience with that. That's number one. Number two is, I think we need a human baseline. The fact that we've gotten away from this idea, personal human baseline, of not taking images of us over time, right? How, when you do skin cancer is pretty much preventable completely. We just don't have a way properly to look at our bodies over time, so we're not capturing that, even in basic imaging. Pretty sad. But whether it's a self-service model or a booth at Walgreens, or whether it's with your cell phone, I think that's coming. Number three, you start with the 30 million uninsured, or at least they should be part of the solution, because if you can get them to lock onto this, you sure as hell can get the upper crusty 5% to do it, right? You need to also attack at the fringe, not just start in the creamy center. And so I think by doing that, this is pretty important. You also think about the prediction game. Lots of people are in this, but I think that's really need to start validating models and lowering the rate of disease progression, and then you can see what risk models are going to win. You also have to be designing the practice of medicine. If you think making a little app for Fitbit is medicine, it's not. It's a start of it, but you need to understand how current practices work and then how we can make them better. So that means, how do nurses get paid? Through Medicare or CMS. How does CMS even work? Okay? There are lots of back-end systems which are painful to use. There's the actual, how do you design the experience of going into a small, beautiful clinic? What is the exercise of that? Now, that's not available to all of us, but by not being involved in the design and the practice of health, then I think you're one or two or N steps away from it, and it's harder to have impact on. Now, let's pretend for a fact that, as a United Statesian, this is how we are taught the world works, money at the center, but let's just make the assumption that we are a particular camp that sees nature at its core. It's the slowest moving force on this, right? It's called pace layering. I didn't make this up. Someone much, much smarter than I did over the Clock Along Now Foundation. And what happens is that the fast parts here, right, learn, propose, and absorb shocks and things like that, and the slower parts remember, they integrate, and they constrain, and they have all the power actually in the middle. As the farther you get down to the middle, the more power is probably the only word I know right now because I'm losing it, but I think you have to play at different levels of this game in order to have impact. All right? It was Stuart Brand who came up with this. So why am I telling you this? I think you need to get into the policy game, because it's one thing to design and be in the fashion world or do the e-commerce thing or get into infrastructure, but as you get into infrastructure and governance, that's where you can get even more endurance and potency in the way you design. And so what do I mean by that? Well, I have to eat some of my own lecture here, is that I too over the past decade have tried to be involved in policy making. So now we just released electronic healthcare design guidelines that are open source and funded by NIH. Again, you should do this to see how the sausage is made. Data standards are painful. You want to take razor blades and just smoke yourself after 2 meetings. But by going through and demanding excellence, you may get some mediocre results, okay? Because all of us, what we're doing is what Orbitz did to travel agents, that medical tech, design, and culture shifts are doing to doctors. This is now going to be my doctor for the first and second rounds of diagnoses. And then when it gets serious or needs a human in the loop, then the third will be the human. It's already like that in oncology. You go to MGH or anything like that, and guess who's doing the scans and reading the scans the first and second time? Machines. Then for those that need the diff, the humans come in, okay? So that's where this is going, or devices like that. But ultimately, it's not just about technology. It's about the human experience, about living and not worrying about my health. It just sort of happens. Because that's what data does. It allows us to live aware of our health. For example, when I'm told that ice cream is bad, yeah, sure, I get it. It's high in fat and cow milk. But we're sort of like, okay, that's bad, now so what? And you don't want to be taking pictures of your food all the time because I don't want this quantification where I have to look everything up, right? That just seems insane. I want this sort of, here's my daily health report. Eating this way took 2.5 days off my life for the past year. Maybe not that brutal, but that's the start of when the world changes and not before. And that's when we start to get to stage 0 detection, where we are finding things as they erupt, right? There's now programs at Harvard that are looking at giving you almost like a daily vitamin to fix proteins that are not replicating correctly, because those turn into cancers and other funky things, right? So that's preventative, and you just take a small pill potentially, and all of a sudden disease changes. So that's my talk on Design for Life. I have a 4-minute sort of diatribe on my health axioms, which you can get over there as well. So I'll just do that and tell you what I think they are. So I'm just going to introduce them. They're open source. Yeah, this is my son. At least I'm pretty sure he's my son, DNA-wise. He's holding one of the cards, right? He washes his hands about 8 times a day. Wonder why? Well, believe it or not, it's not always about technology as much as I proselytize about some of that. You think it's about the latest iWatch that's coming out or your band, but in reality it's about old-fashioned behavior. It's about sitting down at the dinner table on Sunday nights, right? Hopefully several nights a week you're eating with your family or your kids or whoever, eating green peas and kale. Maybe it's tofu instead of lamb. Now, remember what at least my mother and my grandmother used to say, get the frick out of the house. Go play. Say please and thank you, right? Grab some veggies from the garden. That's where the health axioms sort of, at least we're trying to help have them fit in. It's a deck of cards that allow people to sort of cut through the BS and focus on clear, actionable advice that hopefully impact your health and how we impact the healthcare system. So each card has a single idea on it. It's like one specific behavior we should concentrate on. On the back are these easy-to-follow highlights that help you take practical action, right? And they're graphic examples. They use a visual story because we, as a species, really good at the pictures, right, to communicate something important about your well-being. They should be easy to understand, easy to learn. Some are easier to share than others. And you use them. This is my picture of my bathroom at home. I stick them on my bathroom mirror. This is a doctor's office in Palo Alto, Kim Carlson, and who doles them out to her patients. You can keep them in your pocket as reminders. You can use them as environmental graphics to change behavior as well, which we're doing with the clinic also, just starting in a month. Now, I think we're onto something. I don't think this is the exact same thing because we as United Statesians spend, what, $50 billion on this kind of stuff, and on behavior change alone, a lot. And this is only version 1. This is version 2, which we're pushing out in a few months. Meet Your Eats. Avoid sunburn. This is, know your care team, because it's not just about you. It's about all the people that surround you, proxies, parents, and doctors alike, and pets. Food is medicine. We also are finding that sub-packs are erupting from this, right? So the doctors, some of the clinicians who are using it saying, look, these 5 are really good for pre-type 2. Again, these are all open source, by the way. And all the work that I attempt to do, including HGraph and others, are all licensed under Apache or CC3, CC attribution. Now, I know absolute compliance is impossible. I mean, we have to enjoy life and occasionally have a cookie breakfast. But the idea here is that the health axioms are a smart way to remind us about making smart choices, about choosing healthier habits. And the idea is that they will improve your health, your sense of well-being, and your outlook on life. So I really love these cards, but we're looking for feedback. So take some, give some, and email them back. Email me feedback. Thank you very much. Any questions?
We have mics if you have questions.
How do you see all of this transforming the doctor-patient relationship? So how do all these biometrics that are being collected feed into that relationship? Does it remove the need for, actual human beings providing some sort of intervention in my life? Or is it now limited intervention with all this biometrics? Or do I become my own doctor now?
Well, I think there are multiple tangents to take that. One is, currently, your doctors are not taking any of that data for the most part, right? They sort of freak out when they see anything unusual that may actually come from you, because they're primarily worried about the Googles and WebMD and catastrophic failures of the internet, right? And there's some justification there. Heck, they don't. But there's also a training issue. They don't know much about, most GPs, most non-geneticists know much about genomics, right? And yet we're getting 23andMe tests. We're going to Mount Sinai now. It's part of like IVF, where anything you do in getting pregnant, right? You have a genome test, a genetic test to see if you have n number of conditions. And most doctors do not know how to deal with that. So there's a training issue there as well. Now, rounding that back to your question is, I think over time, yes, doctors' role is going to dramatically change with humans. Are we going to become our own doctors? We're going to be more responsible for it, I think. I think Dr. Watson is going to help us with that, right? So, IBM's, Watson on Jeopardy, you can see already that it's getting better and better and better at diagnosing based on 4 to 8 different data points. Again, that's not nearly enough. But I think we're going to get to a point where the first and second diagnosis is by a machine. And then there are services like Health Tap, like you can go through, there are 20 of them, or they're just erupting, where you put in your goodies, it has your basic fundamentals, and it says, I have a question, answer this for me. Boom. Within 30 seconds, there's an answer. There's KidsDoc, right? There's basically a clinical decision support system that does this. And over time, I'll wrap it up, sorry I'm boring you here, but we're going to see more and more of that, and I think doctors' roles are going to change to be much more of a specialized coach for you, right? Not a life coach, I wish they were, but a specialized health coach based on your data, and they're going to be soaking that in. It's just, I think we're at least 5 years away from that being a reality, if not more. It's unfortunate. But you're going to see it in concierge service, sorry. Concierge service, you're seeing that much more. You walk down a hip neighborhood in Brooklyn, and there are these small little offices, right? And I'm like, wow, what the hell is that beautiful brownstone? I walked in, and there's a gorgeous, it was all decked out in like 18th century French furniture, right? And I'm like, wow, this is neat. It's a doctor's office. There were 2 doctors there. I walked in, hey, can I get an exam? Like, yeah, sure, we'll walk you through it. I'm serious, right? So, and they did the whole hour and a half. Like, when's the last time a nurse has done the whole physical motion activity with you? Can anyone remember that? Human baseline, okay? You're not getting it. So that kind of concierge service now is making a huge dramatic push. So I think you're going to get more and more of that too. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
You painted a nice picture of mirror taking measurements of me and giving me advice about how I should be doing things differently. But outside of simple things like eat more good food and less bad food and exercise more and sleep more, nutrition and lifestyle for health is non-trivial and difficult and not solved and full of bad information and fads and so on.
Yeah, right on. Yeah.
I'm interested in how you see using all of this as a way to collect data for scientists. I come from a complex systems data heavy research background, and I'm curious how you see that system working. Yeah, but in more detail a little bit. Yeah,
So how are we going to use that as scientists? Well, one is, I think the first
especially
thing,
considering people's concerns about privacy and so on.
yeah, unfortunately, privacy is dead. Okay, you're going to have privacy. I see the look. For the most part, I'm not a proponent of everyone being open. There's no. No, I'm 5 sigma, 6 sigma out there in terms of my openness. I'm not expecting everyone to do that, right? But there'll be some things that are protected, right? But look, there's no even law now protecting the pejorative use of your health data, right? There's HIPAA, right, which is all fabulous, but we fax. You don't have an audit trail, right? There's all this kind of stuff. But to get to your point about what do we do as scientists, I think the first big part of that will be electronic consent. Until you have a machine, a mechanism, in order for you to be able to get people, humans, into a system relatively easily, right, and allow it to be part of their everyday health activities, and e-consent is one really powerful way to do that. I think that is going to change the tide in how scientists get information, because part of that consent, a second screen of that or something is, hey, do you want to donate part of your data? You may be able to say what part you want to donate, right? Yep, I want to do my weight, I want to do my genome, or whatever it is, boom, 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 or nope, nope, nope. Or do you want to submit it for a study or something like that? Until we have it digital like that, and where we have audit trails, where I can say over time yes or no to things, where I can see impact, where the patient is involved in some way as well. That, I think, is a huge shift in how to do it. And you're seeing 2 hospitals take the lead on e-consent. 2 organizations, Sage Bionetworks and Mount Sinai, are leading the charge on that. John Wilbanks is a huge proponent at NIH for e-consent as well. Yeah.
All right, so you pointed me out, so now I have to say my piece. I think your attitude on privacy is incredibly facile, damaging, and reeks of privilege. Surveillance has never, ever benefited people. And more to the point, the lower down you are on the socioeconomic scale, the worse off surveillance is for you. If you're in Ferguson,
There's
surveillance sucks. Okay? If you're Larry Ellison, you can not only spend $2 million on your house, you can spend a further $8 million buying the 4 houses around you and demolishing them so as to preserve some illusion of physical privacy. I think that if you are going to urge people to get involved in the policy level, which I would agree with, then policy needs to encompass how these data are collected, who has access to them, and how they're used. And in particular, a policy that says privacy is dead, so we should get over it, is really, really harmful. Okay? You may be 6 sigmas out, but you still have passwords on your account.
That's 2 separate things. The fact that I'm saying privacy is dead, again, there's a lot of, extra over-the-topness on that, is different from the fact of it being very, very easy to get information about people today. Right? So you have to bifurcate that argument. I understand that privacy is a big issue, but for the most time, within 2 data points, you can nail somebody and see exactly what's happening in their life for the most part, right? And that's going to become more and more true. So I'm not saying anything that hasn't been proven by Deb Estrin at NYU and now at UCLA, who does all these cell studies, right, about privacy and the illusion of privacy. So I'm not advocating that. I'm just telling you what current research, what current technology has unfortunately allowed for most of the, most United Statesians.
Right, but there's a difference between the situation exists and therefore we should all lie back and enjoy it. And there's the
did
situation
I say that?
Yes. You said it. Privacy is dead. Get over it.
Well, okay.
I'm sorry, but that's the attitude you're projecting, and I don't want to give you a hard time, but you did call me out, so I'm going to give you a hard time. If you're going to stand up there and advocate what people what people should be doing, I think it's irresponsible for you to tell people to ignore this situation.
I'm not telling you to ignore the situation. I'm just saying it's part of what we're dealing with. If you want to change it, go to Washington or are you participating in what work work bodies for HL7, for HIPAA, for HIMSS, for you go through the NIH and National Library of Medicine. That requires our help as engineers, as designers, right, to enforce that, to build those policies, right? That's why I say get involved, right? If you don't, then crap like this is going to happen. We're going to become even more of a DoD state. Look what happened when, Boston bombing, right? We turned into a militarized zone, right? I'm not advocating this. I'm just telling you what is happening. Yes?
I don't know, maybe I'll put my 2 cents into. If you really are concerned about privacy, there's a guy by the name of Ed Snowden who released some documents about what the NSA are doing. And just the past few days on 60 Minutes and also on NPR today, they were interviewing a New York Times reporter who's being prosecuted for releasing government reports about the extent to which surveillance is going on. And if you think that is bad, the same thing is being done commercially. Google is absorbing everything you have. Recently, there was a scandal with Jennifer Lawrence, and more recently, what was it, Snap? Whatever. Was being released just a day or two ago. So you probably have a lot less privacy than you realize. However, if you really want to make your medical information available to researchers, there's a very good group at Harvard Medical School called the Personal Genome Project, which is trying to measure everything about you. And they have a conference each year in about April where they report on things like your microbiome, the original people who had their gut, all the bacteria in their guts measured over a period of time to see what happened when they got sick while they were traveling and things like that. There are so many ohms, I've lost track of them, but the people running it are George Church and Jason Bohm out of Harvard Medical School, the Personal Genome Project. And if you're interested in participating in things like that, you might want to look into that.
Where they sequence your entire genome for free. You do have to open source it as part of that sequencing.
I enjoyed your presentation and
Well, there's one. Okay.
and having done a few years penance on an HL7 committee, I recommend it to anyone who appreciates the galactic speed of glaciers.
Yes.
And they want to recalibrate. But
Did you work on fire?
I'm sorry?
Did you work on fire?
I worked in the Andover Working Group years ago.
Okay.
But I didn't work on fire. But the point is, I've worked in medical products for most of my career, and I thought the problem with advancing healthcare was primarily technology. And that may have been true for 20 or 30 years, but I think now the problem is more policy and availability of information. And having worked as the HL7 group, the resistance, the fear of loss of privacy that may have already been lost has acted as an incredible obstacle.
Yeah.
Personal identification, knowing who you are when you're in a hospital or when an ambulance stops to try to figure out who you are before they treat you is a big problem.
Yep.
And the biggest problem is our fear of being identified, a common identifier, so that in many ways healthcare is handcuffed about doing what it can do now. I feel like the farmer who's talks to an agricultural student, and the student's trying to teach him how to farm, and he says, I'm not even farming half as good as I know how to now. We're not doing half of what we can do now. So I think, in terms of privacy, we need to be very thoughtful about what really we're trying to protect, and take a lot more responsibility, to change government policies that allow us to be as good as we know how to be now. So.
Yeah, the UID problem is a big one. Unique ID or universal ID is that we think our social securities are unique. They're not. Someone else can have your same social security number, right? 3 other people can have your same social security number, right? So they're not unique, nor are they close to enduring, right? And so this is something that, policy, at least in the current state, will never get through. But I think everyone who is born in this country, on this planet, should have a unique and enduring ID, right? So that 10 generations from now, I get run over by a bus tomorrow. Maybe some of you are thinking, yay, but I get run over. My kids' kids, whatever, will have a record of that and be able to find me, in whatever database or whatever it is that's uniquely tied to me. I mean, that just seems like common sense, right? When you're doing your 1040 or IRS taxes to do that. But like that's not going to fly recently, at least in the next couple of years.
If you just shift it and go from good and helpful, if you just shift this and go from good and helpful to evil, you can become a prisoner in your own home because they know where you are, who you are. You may not be able to get a job because your genome was taken, and they know if you've got a propensity to heart disease. And you don't even get to walk in the door, and you may be the best qualified person. So any of these, it's just like Hamlet. Nothing's either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. What you do with the data is everything. You can be a prisoner in 1984 with Big Brother knowing everything about you. And look what happened to them. And that's all so simply human.
Yeah, I just don't want to be afraid of that, though. I don't want the gating factor to be fear, right?
And that's a good point. And what the question I had intended to ask was, all the information on what you need to do to be healthy is very useful, but it doesn't change behavior, like you said.
Yeah.
Have the ice cream anyway. We're great at selective inattention and not paying attention to what we dislike
Right on.
paying attention
Yeah.
to. Any of this stuff deal with, like you talked about your own losing weight, you said it took years.
Yeah.
Because you had to battle yourself, and yourself was pretty tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a human condition, sure.
Are there any assists coming from all this besides the cards?
Oh, that I'm making?
Well, no,
what do
not
you mean?
personally you, but all this stuff, reading your temperature, anything to do with behavior change.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. I mean, Carolyn, we were talking, she works somewhere, Flexion, is that what it is? It's all they're doing is trying to change humans' behavior, right? Over the long now with, N number of variables of how to attack it from, the flashcards, because they've never been done before in human history, to the bathroom, injects to your toilet, whatever. I mean, they're not doing that, but it takes 40 different ways for you to change behavior probably. Never just one. It's almost never just your mommy saying with a hammer, with a cudgel, go do this. Sometimes that works, right? But we as humans tend to learn how to game that, right? And so it probably takes a slew of different variables in order to do that. And I think the one interesting piece of research that's being done, I think 6 or maybe probably 30 different institutions, all I know is 6 in my head, that are looking at a matrix of behavior change, outcomes, type of human. So it's this whole sort of Rosetta Stone for how do you get from A to B, and what are the little interventions over time that do that? It's not just a B.J. Fogg, Stanford Design School behavior change model, which is very good, by the way. He and another CMU, Carnegie Mellon cat, do that very well. But there's a whole, you need a whole matrix of what kind of behaviors do you need to change that one behavior. And I think if my early onset Alzheimer's is kicking in, but I know I have that written down in some of my GitHub IO. I can email it to you if you're interested. Yes.
The systems that you've been describing, when you mention examples, they're, shall I say, point technologies. There's this system over here that does this, but the wonderful new world in which all of our data will be collected seamlessly and we'll get optimal health interventions based on that data without our having to do anything, it seems to me requires an enormous level of integration of things playing together. And you've mentioned that policy...
Interoperability or something like that?
Policy is an issue, too. There's interoperability. There's limits on the use of the data so that it's used for your benefit and not for your harm.
Yep.
Right now, NSA and Google are collecting our data and selling it to advertisers, and
Apple's collecting the most at the moment.
in any case, they are not collecting it in any way, shape, or form for our benefit. And then you get a policy like HIPAA, which is supposed to provide us with privacy, and instead it puts handcuffs on people such that one of my coworkers would call the nursing home to find out what was going on with her mother, who had Alzheimer's and a tendency to walk, and they'd say, "Oh, we can't tell you, she hasn't given us permission."
Okay, so George, where are you going with this? Tell me, like, so I can lock in.
How can you get to a coherent, well-designed system that encompasses the entire society in our current environment of 100 people rushing off to do their own thing in 50 directions, and a central policy-making body that is determined to run us back into the dark ages?
Ooh, I don't have a good answer for that one. Because I don't know. I mean, there's part of this which is 1,000 flowers blooming, like in the startup world, or companies doing their own thing. I agree there's good things and bad things about that, right? There's also good things and bad things. I used to really be a proponent of a single point of health data being collected, at least the fundamentals. Like someone mentioned when the ambulance comes and picks me up, they have no data for me, right? Is there part of citizenship? Do you have 8 health metrics? You know, blood type, sex, because there are 9 different sexes now. I'm being serious, right? And whatever, you know, what are the 8 different things that everybody can sort of see about you? So then when they come up to you, they can identify you and be able to say, "Hey, you're a diabetic," right? Or whatever it is. But I used to have this fantasy, again, privileged fantasy in some ways, that you know, some national institution, government.gov, would have a protected huge farm somewhere with my data, and that would reside there, and I could always get it. I could proxy people into it, or institutions or whatnot. Again, I don't think the current government has the testicular fortitude in order to make that happen, okay? Technical term. So I don't have a great answer there. What you're seeing, though, again, I'm not saying for better or for worse, is, look, Apple just partnered up with Epic, right? Or the other way around. Epic is one of the biggest electronic health care mafia in the US, okay? And they're tying into HealthKit. Now, Google sort of, you know, didn't put any strength behind their Google Health. I think they had, what, 20 people working on it? In comparison, that tells you something when only 20 people are working on something at a Google. Versus Microsoft's Health Vault has like 400 plus. I don't know the exact numbers now, but that should tell you prioritization. So Google failed, but for some other reasons. But I think Apple has sort of learned from some of those mistakes. We're farther down the evolution pool. And so I think, for better for worse, I think you're going to see HealthKit arrive and get closer to what a self-service model may be. I'm not quite sure. I don't think there's a great answer for that, though. It's because it's going to take a confluence of ideas and policy and startups and big boys and girls getting into the ring. So that's a tough one. I don't know exactly how to answer that. Yeah.
I work for Patients Like Me, one of the websites that
Never heard of it.
encourages people to share medical data or health information with other people.
Yep.
And you've talked a lot in your presentation about devices giving people information, people being able to use that information with their healthcare providers, but you haven't said a whole lot about people using that information to communicate with other people. And I just was curious about what some of your thoughts on that are.
Sure. You have Patients Like Me. You've got Smart Patients, not crazy about the name, but you know, it's a really good idea where the statistic is that 10 really informed patients with a particular condition will trump any single expert doctor in that field, their knowledge, any day of the week, right? Those 10 fabulous individuals who've had the disease, had the condition, or been a proxy or managed somebody in that scenario, that aggregated data will always trump the knowledge of a single expert in the health clinician. So the power that you're going to get from the people in that respect is the democratization, the groupthink that aggregates all that data to get there. Now, I think it works in conjunction. I think you both need patience, rallying behind each other, giving, hey, great job. Here's what I learned. That's what patients like me is doing. Smart patients is having specific, other kinds of conversations and data collections with that. So rock on. I'm totally on board. This was a 35-minute talk, which I stretched. But yeah, it's a required part of your care team is not just your 6 people who are surrounding you and your pet, but all the end people that are helping drive those new decisions that are being made to help you through that. So yeah, rock on.
Well, I've got a question.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what data do you collect about yourself, and how do you use it?
What do I collect now? I weigh myself every morning on a wireless scale. I've been doing this for 8 years. It's a galvanic skin response. It's what's it called? The GoWear Fit or whatever it is. The body media is the original body media. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's there, and I'm just a glutton for punishment. I've tried about a dozen different devices over the past 8 years, 7 years. What else do I use? I use the online Fitbit. I use my patient portal, which stinks. I am part of the Harvard number 43 on PGPRE, so I'm able to send my genome to clinicians and things like that. What do I do with it? Well, now that I've sort of pretend to understand part of my body, right? At least I have this illusion that I do, and that's probably part of the problem. I'm better prepared for when I have an issue. That's mainly the reason why I collect it now, is just it's sort of habit. But I don't think it's necessarily that important anymore. It's just nice to see it longitudinally.
I was wondering if you could give me a little bit more specificity about how the data has fed into your behavior change. So I'm under the impression, based on some of the dashboard stuff, that this helped you lose weight. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, what do you...
It helped me see it.
Help you see it. So I'm
Because
curious,
often we don't see health happen, right? It happens
Sure.
over these slow. It's like it's not like, the companies lopping off tops of mountains to get to the coal, right? It's because you see that pretty quickly. With health, it takes, months, years for small diffs.
So I want like really specific, like a couple instances of very specific, like where you became cognizant of a decision, and somehow this data, or somehow how these sensors have functioned, like where did that change in behavior happen? What was the change? What was the impact?
Okay. First one, easy one, is how I got into the field in the first place, which I was lucky enough to work at a company that brought in these micro clinics, with little services that RNs run to do cholesterol and stuff like that, right? Now I went there. I hadn't had my cholesterol done in a decade, right? Again, I'm a man, in the middle-aged man. I'm in denial about my health, and I had my blood test. Now I didn't know that having a huge meat salami sandwich 6 hours before is going to impact my cholesterol level, but it was just a skyrocket. The nurse came back with bug eye going, how are you a functioning human? So that was the first time that I saw something on it, like about my blood work, and that got me into how do I see this better, right? I'll give you specific examples. The second time was when I was at a conference, and you could sign up to be a part of the Cleveland Health Labs. That's my data, is why I pointed it out there. Is all of a sudden I saw my lipids not getting better. I thought I was doing stuff to change my lipid levels and how much gross cholesterol I had in me. That's not the best metric either, but I could also see waist circumference changes, right, which is probably a lot better than BMI. BMI is a pretty crappy indicator. But if you actually look at waist circumference to height, and I was measuring that for several years, then I could see that along with the Cleveland Labs scaring me into changing a little bit, and that's when I started making sure I counted, this is sort of goofy, how many green meals I had every day, and saying, okay, at least one of my main meals is a green meal, right? And then that's when I started getting on the scale every day, and I've been doing that for 7 years. Right? And so now I can see all the little tinges. And now that may be, for people who are really want to get into this, it may be too much level of detail, because you sort of feel, am I in my fat pants today? Right? That's what last week I felt, right? And so that's another metric for people. I'm being serious about that. Is like for me, it's what clothes can I fit in, and that's even better than data because there's self-worth there or not. I don't know. So those are two examples that I know off the bat that help me see into my body. Keep going.
So, all right. So we're really talking about two different types of changes. Counting green meals and weighing yourself on a scale. It sounds like it's
Basics.
habituating you. The data is habituating you to a certain behavior to effectively collect more data. My question is the point at where you're at the refrigerator and you have a choice, or you're in the aisle, the grocery aisle. What I want to know is, what's the conversation you're having at that point, and how is that affecting? Because that's where the rubber hits the road. When
It does.
When you purchase it and when you stick it in your mouth. And what I want to know is has that changed? Are you becoming aware and saying, if I do this, I know that I'm going to be looking at data tomorrow morning that's not going to be pretty? Because why? Because in the last 6 months, I've had that experience, and I want to make a different choice. What's the conversation, and where has that happened?
Well, conversation happens over a long time. So that's it. Only for me, it took me 4 years to get to a point where I needed to lose weight. Like designing for health. I mean, think about that for a second. Right? Maybe because I'm a moron, a pseudo-functioning moron, but like.
So you're denigrating yourself, but you take yourself as not the exception, but take yourself as the rule.
No, I'm saying that
Really
most humans are.
Sensors, but we're looking at how do we impact behavior.
It takes a long time.
Like everybody else. Let's say you're in this right in the middle of the bell curve on this.
No, what I'm agreeing with you is that, or maybe part of your point is, it takes a long time to change people's behaviors. Lots of different vectors to do it. So there was no single aha moment when I was in Stop and Slop, getting food. It's just over time, right, where I could get it. Right? It's education, repeated education over time, different ways, through data, through clinical visits, through my RN, through a shrink if I had one, or whatever, or family friends, or what I'm eating at work. Another big one was actually, as part of the studio, I had Lindsay come in, who is a health coach and cook. And for 9 months, she worked with us. So repeat that. For 9 months, she worked with us. She threw out every soda, every piece of garbage we had in the fridge. We have a whole kitchen there. We had a kitchen made for the studio, so we cook with each other almost every other day. So it's actually one of the few things in the studio that we require is there's not much on process. It's you have to eat together. And that kind of forcing function, social forcing function, is pretty meaty, right? Pun intended. Right, so that's another big one. Is like I can't tell you one other than the two that I had that led up to that, but they're all slow burns.
So, what I'm hearing about the
tragic, unless it's like really tragic, you have like a huge problem and something happens, and then when you go off a cliff, health-wise, then that's a huge crowbar for change. But I haven't had that yet.
Okay, so what I'm seeing you're talking about is a focus on getting something done, and the data supported you in doing that. And what I would argue is that is probably what this data is best at doing, because I don't see a specific medical value to any of the data for predicting specific complex conditions. I think over in the aggregate, yes, it's useful, but to actually diagnose your particular complex condition, I've worked in pharma for 12 years, and what struck me the most was how little researchers know about what's actually going on in the human body.
Yeah,
I just find it very hard to believe that you can actually take the data that's being collected now and use it for any useful medical purpose other than possibly basic health prevention.
Yeah, but basic health prevention is a huge chunk of the equation, massive chunk of the equation. So if we think that eating a little better, exercising a little more, brushing your teeth, getting a little more sleep isn't like a foundational component of our lives, then we shouldn't be talking, right?
But let's say it is. Is the data going to be the best way for people? Admittedly, it's a good way for many people to get to the point where they understand what's going on to a point where they can do some health prevention. But there's a lot of people that will not have the focus that you have. This will not be a motivator for them. I mean, for instance, a different motivator would be a personal trainer. I mean, Somebody comes in and does it with you directly, or somebody who talks to you, or so on. how does this data weigh against those sorts of methods? And is there an issue about this possibly being a distraction from people actually going and talking to people about their health rather than collecting all the data and going into this thing that
Well,
they
there's
may
two-
not find productive?
Yeah, there's two parts. One, I agree that data is not going to be good. I mean, as a reformed engineer, that's something that sort of vibes with me. So peace. Every human or every group of humans is going to have particular conditions in their own wetware that they're going to respond to, right? So I have sort of by serendipity, by accident, by design, melded some of these in order to inform how I'm going to work, right? As a human. Other people are going to require much different interventions, much different kind of, where their data is really not part of their frontal cortex and how they process all this. I agree, 100% on that. That was the second question in there. I forgot what that was. God damn it. So I agree. I don't have like the solution for that. But I agree that data alone is not there, and different humans are going to require different things. I forgot the second question, which I had something for. I've forgotten. Sorry.
Right.
Okay.
It was distracting.
Good point. Good
Anyway,
point.
well, thank you everyone for the rousing discussion. We should wrap up and
I'll shut up.
we can have private conversations as well. I know some people are leaving. We also have some Kai dessert. I'd like to thank Juhan very much.
Thanks, Sean.
This was great.